Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. As a farmer, I've always been accustomed to the challenges that come with owning and protecting my land. Countless individuals have tried to park their cars and caravans on my property without permission, but most quickly retreat after a polite conversation. This time, however, I encountered a persistent squatter who pushed my patience to its limits. Returning home after a long day's work, I noticed yet another unwelcome presence on my land. A car and caravan defiantly parked without permission. Determined to resolve the issue, I approached the caravan and was met by a young man with a disheveled beard and the unmistakable odor of alcohol. This encounter reminded me of the countless single, inexperienced city dwellers seeking solace in nature, but falling short due to their fear of the wild. Me, this is my property, you need to move. Man, back off, man, you can't tell me where to park my stuff. Me, I can when it's my land and you have no rights to be here. Man, your land, this is nature, buddy. Nobody can claim nature as their own. Words were futile against his stubbornness, so I retreated to my home, hoping he would come to his senses. However, when I discovered him still present the next morning, it was clear that he had chosen to ignore my warning. He seemed intent on playing games, which only meant trouble for both of us. It was time to escalate the situation, but without causing irreparable harm. Equipped with my trusty forklift, a tool I've learned to wield with finesse over the years, I devised a plan to send a powerful message. I carefully lifted his car and relocated it outside my property, positioning it in a muddy area as a small act of revenge. I expected him to wake up, notice the situation, and finally understand the consequences of his actions. To my dismay, at lunchtime, I spotted his car right back on my land, muddier than before. It was evident that he had no intention of giving up his defiant ways. I realized I needed to take a bolder approach, so I woke up earlier the next morning, knowing he would still be fast asleep. With my forklift, I repeated the process, moving his car once more while letting the mud splash even more dramatically. Then it was time to deal with the caravan. As the man awoke to find himself suspended in midair, panic consumed him. Dressed in protective gear, I couldn't discern his words, but heard the muffled sounds of shouting and presumably curses. While he imagined the worst, I seized the opportunity to add a touch of suspense by carefully maneuvering the caravan, causing it to sway as if his fate hung in the balance. Dropping him from a great height or submerging him in water would have been entertaining, yet counterproductive to my goal. Instead, I deposited him unceremoniously in the mud, alongside his car. Watching him step out of the caravan, struggling through the thick mud that stained his pants and likely invaded his shoes, was deeply satisfying. For me, it was the perfect revenge. Turning to face me in the forklift, he awaited a response, but I initiated the conversation to make my intentions crystal clear. Me, I warned you to get off my property. We don't tolerate squatters here, and if I ever catch you attempting to settle here again, I promise I'll relocate your car and caravan to a place far worse than the mud. By the time I return from the barn, you better pray I don't see you anywhere near here. I didn't offer him an opportunity to reply. Instead, I drove the forklift back to the barn, content with the outcome. Upon my return, it was clear that the young man had heeded my warning, as there was no trace of him. Only the lingering marks in the mud served as evidence of his ill-fated intrusion. I had no regrets about my actions, and if anything, I lamented not mixing fresh manure from my stock into the mud as an additional deterrent. This encounter reinforced a valuable lesson: never underestimate the resolve of a farmer when it comes to protecting their land. We issue warnings with sincerity, and trespassing on our territory will always have dire consequences. I doubt that the young man continued his misguided attempts to live among nature after our encounter. Realizing the true essence of nature, beyond the confines of someone else's farmland, likely altered his perspective. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Backstory. After my girlfriend moved to her new apartment closer to both her sister and myself, she obviously wanted internet. Although she isn't fully tech-savvy, she does know the basics. Thus, she explicitly asked the provider if she should be worried about admin kind of Wi-Fi protection. She was assured that it was all fully safe out of the box with no admin. In fact, she was told that she just had to press a button to connect her laptop and her Wi-Fi network would be fully secured. The incident. So, a few months or years later, my girlfriend started to notice that her internet speed went down. This became very apparent while video chatting with some of her family members in Japan. As I mentioned, my girlfriend knows the basics, so she knew that it didn't have to be the internet connection itself. It could also be her laptop, or maybe the network cables had eroded due to age. She decided to explore as many options as possible before contacting her ISP support desk, so she asked me to help. I'm a geek, and I've worked within the field of ICT for over 30 years now, mostly as a systems administrator, but also as an IT manager or co-manager. During this time, I'd still try to keep in touch with my colleagues and even cover shifts if the need arose. So, visiting my girlfriend and getting to show off my L33T IT skills? It took me a moment, but I discovered the issue. Someone was leeching off her Wi-Fi. Technically, the ISP support staff was right. This wasn't an admin kind of thing anymore. It was completely randomized. Sorta. You see, on their routers, the Wi-Fi password was the same as the random SSID, aka network name. What the F? I was quite angry at both this incompetence as well as the blatant disrespect for my girlfriend's privacy. Maybe a bit too much, but yeah. Sure, for some people, this is only about getting internet. But what many people overlook is that such leechers also gain access to your private network. So basically, they could also access any public Windows or Mac shares you may have active, not to mention any other connected devices. Fortunately, my girlfriend knew the basics, as I mentioned earlier, but I was still angry. The revenge. So I suggested something I had done earlier. Let's replace this piece of crap, POS, router with a professional device. Specifically, the same kind of ZXL router that I used at my home so that we could set up a secured VPN between ourselves and get some other nice features as well, like a private VoIP connection. She agreed, so we bought her a new router together. We're talking professional gear here. These things cost about as much as a high-end smartphone, so obviously we were going to split the costs, considering that a mid-level router could also have helped her out. Now, even though I consider her previous router a POS, I still have to admit that it did provide some very useful features, like a syslog service. It could also use USB storage, so I turned on Wi-Fi logging, plugged in a large USB memory stick, and then we waited for the new router to arrive. Then I got to work. First, I set up my girlfriend with a nice hidden Wi-Fi network so that no one could easily find it. Next, we set up a much better security scheme, and then it was time to get even with the lowlifes. I set up a second Wi-Fi network that was completely the same as the previous one, but this time I throttled it down a bit so that it couldn't usurp the full bandwidth. Then I added some specific DNS overrides. DNS is a service on the internet that translates names into IP addresses, which is what your computer needs to connect to something. You may care about reddit.com, but all your PC cares about are the associated IP addresses. The thing is, this service can be easily overridden, and I had studied the logs, so I knew exactly which sites the lowlifes visited the most. So, from now on, going to Bank&L using this router would point your browser to a hardcore, not very legal gay porn website. Not very legal, as in the site didn't bother asking for consent first, but showed you some close-up screenshots right away. Then it was time for BankBeat.L. I redirected that one to a shady Hot Scissors lesbian website. I also noticed that a certain web shop was sporadically used by the leechers, so I decided to redirect that one to a relationship counseling website. When you think your spouse is cheating on you, come to us. It was around that time when I noticed that my girlfriend's router was using a more modern firmware than I had on my router. This one also provided web redirection services. Companies can use this to redirect specific websites based on their URL to a local or remote web page. So, say you don't want your staff to use social media, then you could just tell the router to redirect, say, Facebook.com to a local web page that explains the no social media allowed policy. Much to my delight, this service also supported a randomizer trigger. See, I still remembered a website from the early days of the internet. Something about a goat from Sweden that was so horrible that it became a meme on its own. Seriously, a look at that picture could never be undone anymore. There's a reason I still remember the horror now, an easy 30 years later. So I looked for and found a replacement and then happily added that to a randomized redirection service. So every once in a while, the leechers would open their favorite websites, and no matter what kind of site they asked for, They'd always end up with something completely and utterly disgusting on their screen. Then we waited. I need to point out that my girlfriend did not fully agree with some of my actions, especially when she learned of the aftermath. But we never had an argument over this because she could also understand my point of view. Don't mess with my GF. And she agrees that if you trespass, even in the digital world, then all bets are off and you lose your rights to a civil solution. Don't mess with a geek, McKay. The aftermath. One day, my girlfriend got home from work and noticed a huge moving van outside. She didn't think much of it, but when she got to her front door, she noticed that her neighbor 2 doors over was moving out. She mentioned this to her direct in-between neighbor a few days later, and as it turns out, things completely exploded over there. The shouting and accusations could even be heard through the walls. It seems the couple got into huge arguments about their rather explicit choice of websites, and once the deed was done, there was no room left for any kind of reasoning. One of them even accused the other of hacking the internet, because it was only after the first fallout that those goating pictures started to show up. As far as we know, they broke up. For the record, I regret nothing. I removed the SSID for obvious reasons and also reset the DNS and forwarding sections, and now things are back to normal. More importantly, my girlfriend is still very happy with the router and the extra services to this very same day of writing. She's working her way up as a 3D artist, and the knowledge that all her work will be fully kept safe after she copies her projects onto my NAS is a deal breaker for her. Seriously, you guys, always remember that when you use someone else's internet connection, including free services, you're fully relying on their goodwill. Such services could be easily abused as well, either through pranking like I did or worse. How about I redirect your bank requests to a fake login page so that I can store and/or abuse your data? The next one is a petty revenge story. When I was 18 years old, 10 years ago, I was doing the online dating thing. I live in the US and am about 15 minutes from the Canadian border. My date and I went to Canada together on a first date because I couldn't drink in the US but could in Canada, and we wanted to go to a bar/casino. He picked me up in his little sports car and we rode together through the border crossing and to the casino. We played some games, had some drinks, and were having a decent time. I reached a point where I was decently drunk and knew that if I had any more alcohol, I would be out of commission. I told my date I was done drinking and wanted to start heading home. Instead of listening to me, he went and got us both another round of drinks, and he handed me a big Long Island iced tea. I told him point blank that I couldn't drink it because I was at my limit. He didn't take too kindly to that and became pushy. He said, "You have to drink it. I bought it for you. If you don't drink it, you're going to make me waste money." No matter how many times I told him no, he continued to push me on this. I got very frustrated and upset because I was alone with this pushy man in another country, and I was very upset with myself for getting into this situation. We argued for a while, and eventually I snapped and formulated a little plan. He agreed to take me home after I finished the drink. I took the drink from him and chugged it. We got into his car and started for the border. It's important to note that this guy was very proud of his car. He spent the whole drive to the border telling me about all the features and how much he loved it. I spent the whole drive ignoring him and focusing on keeping my sick stomach under control. My goal was to make it through the border crossing at least, which was proving pretty difficult. We eventually made it through the border crossing, and as soon as we made it back to the US, I turned in my seat to look him in the eyes and told him, "I didn't appreciate how you forced alcohol down my throat after I repeatedly told you no. I know my limits and you ignored and disrespected me. I said I couldn't drink more for a reason." Then, while maintaining direct eye contact with him, I started vomiting in his car. I knew this was coming and specifically positioned myself to cause as much damage as possible. I threw up on the seat, the floor, the dash, etc. He was freaking out, and I just started crying and telling him that this was his fault, and he could either take me home or let me out of the car now. But I will call the police if he doesn't proceed with one of the two options. He dropped me off at home, and I never saw him again. The next one is an entitled parent story. I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I have a black horse. The color is important for later, named Ebony. I have her at a boarding stable where I used to get riding lessons before getting my own horse. For some reason, though, horses tend to attract entitled people. This wasn't my first encounter with them here. Here are the cast. Me, entitled Mom, I will call her Barn Witch. Entitled Daughter, I will call her Barn Goblin. And my old trainer who still works there. So I had my horse tied up in a spot where you have room to groom them and tack them up. I was brushing her down when Barn Goblin showed up, wanting to pet Ebony. I told her not to pet her since I didn't know this kid, and it's not a good idea to go near strange horses with the risk of being kicked. Horses can kill if they kick. Barn Goblin screamed, "Mommy, she won't let me pet the black horse." That's when Barn Witch showed up, huffing, "Lady, I have a kid, and she wants to pet your horse." "No, it's not a good idea to pet strange horses since they can be skittish," I told her. "Barn Goblin wants yours, though. She only likes black horses, and the trainer only let her ride a white one," Barn Witch snapped. "I'm sorry, but this isn't his horse, it's mine, and that horse the trainer brought out is better with new people. Others aren't," I said, trying to keep calm. Right then, we heard Barn Goblin scream, and her hand was bleeding. She had tried petting my old trainer's new horse, the only other black horse there, and this horse didn't like strangers at all. It resulted in Barn Goblin getting bit pretty hard. My old trainer came out to see what was going on, and I must say he is someone you don't want to mess with. After I explained what happened and what was going on, my old trainer snapped at them, telling them to leave and find another place to ride. Not only did this kid get bit for not listening, but she was also yanking on and using spurs on his other horse, which wasn't allowed. I just smirked when Barn Witch and Goblin were kicked out, never to be seen again. Sorry, this wasn't my best story, but I wanted to share it. Update. For those asking, the trainer did see the spurs, but Goblin wouldn't get down or remove them when he asked her to. He eventually forced her off with a warning. The biting was the final warning. I heard this from him after they left, since I wasn't in the arena when it happened. For those asking for pictures, it's not a good idea, since the horse that bit Goblin was an off-track thoroughbred that wasn't socialized properly, and my own is a rescued Tennessee Walker that can be skittish. So it wouldn't be safe to have a camera near them. The next one is an entitled parent story. Last night, when I went to sign into Netflix, I discovered that my TV had been signed out. I attempted to sign back in, but couldn't. It had been about a year since my last sign-in, so I assumed I had simply forgotten my password and requested a reset. When I checked my email this morning, I noticed a message from Netflix confirming that my password had been successfully changed. This immediately raised a red flag, so I decided to update passwords for all our subscription services and also changed my email password just to be safe. About an hour ago, I received a call from my brother's ex-wife, let's call her Kate, who asked why I had changed my password. I wasn't aware that she still had my account information, which annoyed me a bit, so I explained that someone had changed my password and I didn't feel comfortable sharing my account details, especially with someone I wasn't in contact with. Now, let's backtrack a bit. My in-laws are currently staying at our home, and it seems that at night, when everyone is asleep, there are 4 devices simultaneously streaming on our Netflix account. During the call, Kate mentioned that she had tried to access our account on Christmas night, but received a message stating that there were too many users currently logged in, preventing her from accessing it. She got the idea that it would be perfectly fine with me if she logged into our Netflix account and changed the password so that she and her new husband could watch their show. She presented this as if it were the most reasonable request in the world. I nearly lost my temper. I couldn't fathom how anyone could think it's okay to change someone else's password just because they're too cheap to pay for their own subscription. I firmly told her that I didn't want to hear from her again, refused to provide our account information, and ended the call. 15 minutes later, she called my wife, this time requesting the Disney Plus password. Unfortunately, I had lazily used the same account information for all our streaming services, and she managed to figure it out and gain access to several of our accounts. When I realized who my wife was speaking to and what the conversation was about, I motioned for the phone. Kate was whining about needing access to Disney Plus so that her 18-month-old son could watch Bluey, insisting that it was crucial for his bedtime routine. At this point, I lost my patience and told her to leave us alone before hanging up. What a great way to ruin my mood for the night. The next one is a choosing beggar story. So, some backstory. I work at a place that sells sandwiches, and we deliver. Today we were extremely busy during the lunch rush, and as a result, delivery times were a little slow. We were making sandwiches as fast as we could, but there were too many orders. Our in-shop line customers who come in and order at the counter, was literally out the door. On top of all of that, we were understaffed because 2 of our employees had quit. Instead of the 5-man sandwich making crew we should have had, it was 3 people. And one of them was the new guy who started last week. He had to stop and ask what came on every sandwich. Eventually, we just put him on the register so that the other experienced employee and I could focus on making the orders. When it finally slowed down, the last few delivery orders were still on a 40-minute wait, which isn't even that crazy for delivery. Domino's often takes twice that when it's busy. A lady comes in, and while she doesn't have the "can I speak to your manager" haircut, she's making a face. Anybody in the service industry knows the face. Total Karen. I know it's going to be some bullcrap right away. Karen. I ordered a delivery for 3 sandwiches and it never showed up. We're hungry. We've been waiting for an hour. Perfectly possible. It's been a hectic morning and mistakes happen. Me. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Can you give me the name and address on your order? Karen. Karen McFack, name at 5555 Someplace Drive, NW. I pull up the order and have to really put in effort not to roll my eyes. Me. I see that you placed the order 27 minutes ago. Our driver left with it 5 minutes ago. Karen. Well, he took too long and I had to leave work to come get it. You guys weren't answering your phones. Not true, by the way. If we'd stopped answering phones, the morning wouldn't have been so hectic. Me. Okay, well, we can make your order for you now and waive your delivery fee since you came to get it. Karen. What are you going to give me to make this right? I'm thinking, I said I would give you the food and the delivery fee. What the hell else do you want? Me. Sorry, I'm not authorized to fully comp any meals. She huffs, and then stands there at the counter while we make her food, which you're not supposed to do since other people come in to order. And we have a designated spot for picking up completed orders, but whatever. I don't say anything. We give her food and she leaves, and I text the driver telling him that he can skip that order and move on to the next one since she already came and got it. The story should end there, right? Wrong. 15 minutes later, we get a call asking where the delivery is, and I get their name and address. I was very surprised to hear that it was Karen McFackename at 5555 Someplace Drive, NW. I double-checked twice. It was the same name and address. Now at first I thought that maybe someone else had overheard Karen order and came to make a fake complaint and get free food. Me. Oh, I'm so sorry. There must be some sort of mix-up. I just had a woman come in saying that this was her order, so we made her the food and canceled the delivery. Karen screaming, That was me! You said the delivery driver was on the way. Where is he? Me. Let me get this straight. You came to pick up the food and I gave you the money for the delivery back and gave you the food, but you were still expecting us to deliver it? Again? For free? Karen. Yes! To make up for me having to leave work and get it. Me. Miss, you didn't have to come and get your food. You chose to. It was already on its way. If you wanted it delivered, you should have waited for the driver. Karen, no longer screaming. Can I speak to your manager? Oh, you absolute fool. Don't you know? Me. I am the manager. Click. Guess she didn't want to talk to the manager, huh? Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.